Presenting recommendations. Hi, Dr. Tucker. This is Ashley Hillman, and I'm going to be walking you through my Module 10 assignment. Problem and purpose statements. The problem is that student ACT scores have been declining in Nebraska. To address this, researchers aim to explore how teachers' experience relates to academic achievement measured by ACT scores. The objective is to understand and address disparities in student performance, identify factors contributing to achievement gaps, and inform strategies to promote educational equity. The purpose of this study is to examine the relationship between teachers' years of experience teaching and student performance on the ACT exam. By investigating how teachers impact student ACT scores, this research aims to provide valuable insights into the potential influence of teachers' experience on student standardized test performance in Nebraska. The findings of this study can contribute to a better understanding of the role of teacher experience in student academic achievement and inform educational policies and practices aimed at improving student outcomes on standardized tests like the ACT. The research question is, what is the relationship between standardized test scores and teacher tenure? My hypothesis is there is no statistically significant relationship between standardized test scores and teacher tenure, or there is a statistically significant relationship between standardized test scores and teacher tenure. Design and methodology. I will utilize the profound insights of Bandura's social learning theory. This theory, developed by Albert Bandura, is a cornerstone in studying new behaviors through observing others and the consequences of those actions. Its applications are far-reaching, explaining behaviors such as aggression and pro-social behavior and developing various skills. In education, for instance, teachers can harness the principles of observational learning to model positive behaviors, fostering a conducive environment for various behaviors, such as aggression, pro-social behavior, and the development of various skills. Bandura's social learning theory can be applied to education, psychology, sociology, and communication. For this example in education, teachers can use the principles of observational learning to model positive behaviors and encourage students to learn through observation and imitation. As applied to my study, this theory holds that I would expect my independent variable of the teacher's years of experience to influence or explain the dependent variable of 2 years of ACT scores. Because if they did, then according to Bandura's social learning theory, they would model positive behaviors that students would imitate, which in turn would help them score better on the ACT the second time. For this quantitative research project, I will use Pearson's correlation coefficient. It is a statistical measure quantifying the degree and direction of a linear relationship between two continuous variables. The subgroups I plan to use include breaking the data down into building numbers and subjects tested. Quasi-experimental research designs have gained popularity in social sciences and beyond due to their practicality and ability to provide valuable insights into cause and effect relationships. While not as rigorous as true experimental designs, quasi-experimental studies offer researchers a middle ground between pure correlational studies and controlled experiments. Ethical considerations in quasi-experimental studies allow researchers to observe natural phenomena without interfering with them. The researcher would not manipulate or control a certain variable in this true experimental, as in a true experimental setting. Quasi-experimental instrumentation. For this research project, I will be using quasi-experimental instrumentation. Quasi-experimental research designs have gained popularity in social sciences and beyond due to their practicality and ability to provide valuable insights into cause and effect relationships. While not as rigorous as true experimental designs, quasi-experimental studies offer researchers a middle ground between pure correlational studies and controlled experiments. Ethical considerations in quasi-experimental research allow researchers to observe natural phenomena without interfering with them. The researcher would not manipulate or control certain variables in a true experimental setting. Quasi-experimental designs are well suited for studying phenomena in real-world settings where researchers have limited control over the variable of interest. By leveraging existing conditions or inventions, researchers can study the effect of these factors on outcomes without artificially manipulating them. This makes quasi-experimental research highly applicable to fields such as education, public health, and social sciences, where experimental manipulation may not be feasible. Moving on to data collection, the superintendent of Omaha Public Schools permitted the survey to be distributed to the school principals, who distributed it to teachers in their building. The IRB of Nebraska was then contacted to obtain approval for the online survey to be distributed and research to be conducted. Teachers received the survey in the form of an email from their school principal and were given 2 weeks to submit it. Data was compiled from the Nebraska State Department of Education report card. Part of the data obtained at the Nebraska Department of Education includes ACT scores. When the total population is relatively small, in this case, we had 300 teachers who were sent the survey, and 250 of them completed it. Researchers often aim to sample a larger portion of the population to ensure the sample is representative. A common rule of thumb is to aim for a sample size that is at least 30% of the population size. For a population size of 300, a sample size of at least 90 individuals could be considered a minimum number. It is recommended to use statistical formulas and sample size calculators, or consult with a statistician to determine the appropriate sample size for a real study based on specific parameters and research goals. To have a higher confidence level, the sample size should also be as large as possible. Data analysis. For the purpose of this assignment, the sample population was pulled from a database of ACT scores of students from the last 2 years. The release of the scores also included the variables teachers, number of years taught, student gender, building location, and students subjects tested. Before the data was collected, several requirements had to be met. Participant permission would have to be granted, especially if the data were from a minor, and the parent or guardian would have to give written permission for the data to be part of the study. The Institutional Review Board must review and check for compliance with ethical standards and participant protection. The target population is high school students. This demographic would require 2 signatures on informed consent documents, the student taking the test and the legal guardian. To get enough participants, the data would be collected from a city with a large population. Purposive sampling is a non-random sampling technique where the researcher selects samples based on their knowledge of the population and the specific purposes of the study. In purposive sampling, researchers intentionally choose participants who have specific characteristics of experiences that are relevant to the research questions. Teachers from the Omaha Public School District were asked to participate in an online survey. The survey asked about teachers' years of experience, education level obtained, and their perception of those factors. The survey also asked which subject the teacher was testing, in addition to the building they were taught in. The principals collected the data at each of their respective schools. The population consisted of high school teachers who taught in the district in 2021 and 2022. There were 300 high school teachers in the district, of which 250 completed the survey. Executing sampling procedure. The first step in executing a purposive sampling procedure for data collection is to define the population and sampling frame by choosing a population of interest, in this case, high school teachers at Omaha Public Schools. The population is representative of Omaha Public Schools because all teachers were asked to participate in the online survey. The second step is to select a random sampling method. I will use purposive sampling. Every member of the population who was emailed the link to the survey has an equal chance of taking it. This link was emailed to all teachers in the district who administered the ACT. The third step is to reach out to the selected teachers in the sample to collect the necessary data. Ensure that the data collection process is standardized and consistent, and ensure there are no biases. My findings agreed with Weaver's findings that there was a weak negative relationship between teachers' years of service and ACT scores, and the correlation was not statistically significant. As a result of the analysis, the hypothesis was not rejected. The results generally suggest no significant relationship between years of teacher experience and student ACT scores. Findings. I answered my research questions, which asked, what is the relationship between standardized test scores and teacher tenure? Based on my testing using a correlation, I had failed to reject the null hypothesis, which was there is no statistically significant relationship between standardized test scores and teacher tenure. Here's my list of recommendations. Conduct studies to track the impact of teacher tenure on student outcomes over an extended period, not just a couple of years, but long term. Explore other factors that may influence student achievement, such as teacher effectiveness, classroom environment, and school resources in addition to the teacher tenure. Number 3, utilize more sophisticated statistical methods such as multi-level modeling or propensity score matching to account for potential confounding variables and better understand the relationship between teacher tenure and student performance. Number 4, base policies related to teacher tenure on a comprehensive evaluation of teacher effectiveness and student outcomes rather than relying solely on standardized test scores. Number 5, consider implementing professional development programs to support teachers in improving their instructional practices, regardless of tenure status. Number 6, encourage schools to adopt performance-based evaluations that consider a variety of factors, including classroom observations, student feedback, and professional development participation in addition to test scores. Number 7, encourage policymakers to engage with educators, researchers, and other stakeholders to inform policy decisions related to teacher tenure and student assessment. Number 8, monitor and evaluate the impact of policy changes on teacher retention, student achievement, and overall school performance to ensure policies are effective and equitable. Number 9, administrators should invest in professional development opportunities for teachers at all career stages to support continuous improvement in instructional practices and student learning outcomes. If you have any questions, you can call me or there is my email.